Hello everybody, it's Diego the Rainbow Star Person, and welcome to this YouTube channel. So, today I'm going to be talking about multiple signs that you could be living your first life in this dimension. So people who are living their first life ever in this dimension, or really any living being that's living their first life in this dimension, that being is considered a new soul. For humans, we would refer to someone who is living their first life in this dimension who is in a human body. That person would be referred to as a newborn infant soul. So the concept is that if you are living your first life ever, you are basically like a newborn in terms of your soul age. If you have lived only a handful of lives, your soul is considered more of a baby soul. If you have lived more than that, more lives than that, you're considered more of a young soul. People like to basically say like the age of a soul based on how many lives that person has had in the past. So there's also, I think, the child soul, the teenage soul, the mature soul, and then the old soul. So this is just based on like soul age and how many lives you have lived in this dimension. And this concept was introduced to me by a twin flame couple, and they run a website called Loner Wolf. It's a really interesting website, and the twin flame couple is named, well, their names are Alethea Luna and Mateo Sol. So they call themselves Luna and Sol, which means moon and sun. So Luna translates to moon and Sol translates to sun. So I thought it was a really interesting topic. I think I came across a quiz on their website about soul age. And when I took the quiz, I got that I'm an infant soul. It was interesting. So yeah, I actually am living my first life ever in this dimension, which is why I want to make a video about this, just so that all of you know what the signs are that you could be living your first life ever in this dimension. So let me get started. So the first sign that you could be living your first life ever in this dimension is that you specifically have asked your heart how many past lives you've had, and when you close your eyes and place your hands over your heart like I am right now and meditate for a while, when you close your eyes and meditate for a while and ask your heart, how many past lives have I had in this dimension? You wait until you see a number in front of you in your mind's eye, in your third eye. And when I asked myself that question for the first time, when I asked my heart that question, I saw the number 0. And that essentially means to me that I am living my first life ever in this dimension because I've had 0 past lives in this dimension. So it's a sign. So if you ask the universe or ask your heart how many past lives you've had in this dimension and you see the number 0, or you keep seeing the number 0 absolutely everywhere, that is a sign that you are living your first life in this dimension, and that you have 0 past lives. So yeah. All right. The next sign is an interesting sign. So I actually was told a while ago by multiple different people, including a psychic actually, that I have past lives. And you know, after a while something didn't quite feel right about them having told me that. And also, like, it's very common for in psychic readings or tarot readings for people to make an assumption that you have past lives when you don't. And like, if you ever feel like, this doesn't seem quite right, or this doesn't feel quite right when someone says that, like, trust your intuition, trust your heart, because they might be wrong. Like, I've been misguided before into basically believing that I had past lives when I didn't. And it wasn't until I asked my heart, like, hey heart, like, have I actually had a past life in this dimension? And like, how many past lives did I have in this dimension? And I saw the number 0. Like if you have that sign and then like you have other people contradicting you, do not fret, because trust yourself more than what other people tell you, because what your heart tells you matters way more than what some random person says or a psychic says. Even like people used to say to me, oh, like you seem like you have an old soul, or you're like, because they were referring to my personality, they were like, you're an old soul and yada yada, or like you seem like you have an old soul, or like you're very mature for your age. And like, it was weird because actually, so mental age psychologically has nothing to do with your actual soul age. So even if psychologically you're more mature than the average person your age, it does not mean that you have reincarnated tons of times in this dimension. It could very well be your first time in this dimension. So there's that. So like, if someone tells you that like you seem really, really like mature or like old for your age, or you feel, or someone tells you like that you have an old soul, or someone tells you that you have past lives, and like it doesn't feel like it quite jives with your vibe, like if it feels like like I don't know, like I'm not really sure about that, like if you have like doubts about it, just trust your heart. It could be a sign that you're not actually, like, you could be living your very first life on earth. So like, even if other people say like, oh, I think you had past lives and yada yada, it might be false. It could totally be untrue. And like, that has happened to me more times than I can even count. So don't let other people tell you how many past lives you had, and don't let other people misguide you, because it could be wrong. And like, yeah, so just don't fret if someone says that about you. Also, like, when I was young, like, people assumed that I was a crystal child because I liked crystals, but I'm not a crystal child. I'm actually a rainbow adult now, and I grew up as a rainbow child. I didn't even know that because I don't have any past lives, because this is my first life, and also because I've always liked rainbows. When I was really young, rainbow was my favorite color, and then I used to like you know, jump back and forth between different colors that I liked, and like I used to like change different colors every 2 seconds, like in terms of like I would change my favorite color like every 2 seconds when I was little, until I just realized I like all the colors of the rainbow. I don't have a color preference. I like any and every color, including neutral colors. Anyways, but that being aside, like, yeah, so like if you feel like, second sign, if you feel like you have a doubt when someone says, oh, I think you had past lives, if something doesn't feel quite right when they tell you that, or if like you don't really know how you feel, and then later on, like months later or weeks later or days later, you're like, oh, well, I don't know if this quite resonates, or I'm not really sure how I feel about what you're saying. Like, that's okay. You know, it's okay not to resonate with when someone tells you a certain thing. That's totally valid, and like your feelings are valid. So yeah, like, this is my first life on earth. If any one of you think that I've had a past life in this dimension, that is untrue, and it will always be untrue, because that's just the reality. So yeah, that is something that is unconditionally true, right? At least for me it is. And like, yeah, so like if you feel like, if someone's like, oh yeah, I think you have all these past lives, and like you're like, oh, I'm not really sure how I feel about that, that's another sign. That's the second sign that you could be living your very first life in this dimension. Oh, third sign that you could be living your very first life in this dimension. When people talk about star seeds, or like saying that, oh, I think you like when people are like, like I think I might have had a past life in another planet, or like in another galaxy or star system or whatever, you're just like, this sounds interesting. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's interesting, but I can't relate with it. Like, that's like how I feel all the time. Like when people talk about, oh yeah, like, you know, I had a past life like in another planet, like in this other like galaxy, I'm like, nice. I can't relate with that, but it's really cool. It sounds interesting. I mean, I bet I could learn a lot from those kinds of people. But like the definition of like a starseed doesn't quite fit in with how you feel. Like, I actually don't like using the word starseed to describe myself, because I don't come from another star system. My soul does not originate from another galaxy or another star system. So it just doesn't, that term specifically does not resonate, because it refers to someone who, usually it refers to someone who comes from a different like planetary system or another planet from another galaxy. And that's something that I don't resonate with, because I am living my very first life in this entire dimension, so it's impossible for me to have lived on another planet before. So this is the very first planet that I've ever lived on so far. So, and yeah. I personally hope it stays that way, but you know, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Anyways. So anyways, back to the topic. So yeah, like the third sign that you could be living your very first life in this dimension is that when other people say, oh yeah, I think I had a past life in a different planet or galaxy or star system, like you just, or like even like in some sort of place in outer space or whatever, you just don't resonate with that. You're just like that. I don't think that's what I've experienced. Like, you just can't relate with it, because it's literally your first life that you're ever living, so you can't really relate with having lived anywhere else other than where you've lived in this life. So the fourth sign that you could be living your very first life in this dimension is that you specifically do not have any past life memories or flashbacks from another time period. So like you are like when people talk about like, oh yeah, like I have this memory about like living in this time period and like this dream, you're like, that's interesting. Well, my dream was more about that I time traveled to different time periods from this present moment. So like I kind of had this dream recently that like I teleported back in time and then teleported back to the present time. But like that's different from actually like having a dream that you actually lived in that time period and were born in that time period. Get what I'm saying? So like your fourth sign basically is that you don't really relate with people who are like, oh yeah, like I feel like I lived in a different time period, or I relate a lot with this past time period. Instead, you relate a lot with the present time period. You relate a lot with the way people are in the present moment, the way people are presently. The fifth sign that you could be living your very first life in this current place that you're living now is that you are very, very simple-minded compared to the average person. Like most people who have had at least one past life like understand better like the complexities of the world, and that's something that you just don't really understand that well. It's like you're just like, like I don't really like what's complicated? I don't understand that. Like, that's like me. I just don't understand complexity. I don't understand how complicated the world can be. I don't understand human dynamics that well. I don't understand that much about like what complicated means, really. I mean, I know what complicated means, but I'm saying like I don't really understand how complicated the world can get. I'm very simple-minded. I see things very simply. Like the way I see things is that like if you love someone, you love them, and that's it. Like, and that's the end of the story. Like, and you gotta show that you love them, and your word has gotta match what you're saying, you know? And love is a feeling, and it's valid, right? So like, love is an emotion, right? So like, it's interesting, like, yeah, just like you're very simple-minded. You're very simple. You don't really understand complexity that well, like of like the way the world works. You don't really understand how politics work. You don't really understand how monetary systems work. You don't really understand how like how so many people can be in poverty. Like there's just so many things that you don't get because you just haven't either one, you haven't experienced it, or two, you just haven't really learned about it. Like the sixth sign that you could be living your very first life in this dimension is that um, your mind is very malleable. And what I mean by that is that what people tell you leaves a big impression on you. Like you're very gullible, and usually more gullible. You might kind of grow out of it as you get older, but like at first, especially like in your young adult years or teenage or child years, you are so easily influenced by what other people say. And especially like you're gullible to the point like that like you believe what anybody will tell you, like cuz like when you're in the spirit world, like you can see whether someone's lying or like saying the truth. But when you're in a human body, you just don't know. Like you can't tell always. I mean, sometimes like you can like try to read if someone's lying or not. But it's like like you'll pretty much believe what anyone tells you. Um, and like and your mind is malleable in the sense that like you are still forming your own like sense of beliefs and stuff. So like you're heavily influenced by what other people believe around you, and it's really easy to be convinced of something that isn't true about you. So like I can give you an example, like segueing back into what I said before, like I previously, you know, thought like I truly believed that I had past lives simply because of what other people told me. But what I should have instead done was relied on my own heart and my own intuition and my own inner guidance system to tell me, oh, you know, this is my first life. I don't need to listen to what other people think or what they tell me. And like I think that's something that you really need to be careful of if you're living your first life, is rely more on your own heart and your own intuition rather than what other people tell you, because it's so easy to be influenced into believing something that is untrue, because you tend to think that what other people are saying is valid or true, and it's not always, you know. So the seventh sign that that you could be a living your first life ever in this dimension is that you are easily trusting and you're very loving. So you tend to trust people way too quickly. This is something I have learned the hard way. You just tend to trust just about anybody, and it's because like you just don't really believe that anyone could ever like want to hurt you, because you believe that people are inherently good, and like that's something that I truly believe, is that people are inherently good. I've always believed that for my whole life. You know, some people don't always do the nicest things. Some people can be mean, but like I think yeah, you readily trust other people. You readily open up to other people. Um, yeah, you tend to open your heart to other people very readily. So yeah, and you're very, very trusting of other people for the most part. Because of this, it's very easy for people to take advantage of you. So just be careful. If you are living your very first life in this dimension, be careful. Don't let other people take advantage of you. So that's why I have learned the importance of like setting boundaries and keeping my boundaries and following through with my boundaries, because it's so very important, especially when you're living your first life in this dimension. Okay, so yeah, that's the seventh sign, that you just, readily trust others more than the average person. The eighth sign that you could be living your very first life in this dimension is that everything feels so foreign to you. Like, it's so weird. Like, it's like your soul is just like goes into this physical body and you're just like, where the heck am I? Like, it's like, this feels so incredibly unfamiliar. And like, that's how I feel all the time. Like, I'm still getting used to being in a human body. It's like so weird. It feels very bizarre for me. And like, it's like, and even just like in general, like, it feels bizarre to be in a physical body. Like, me being like, oh, I have to take care of my body. like like if you're living your very first life in this dimension, like, sometimes you just like forget that you have to take care of your physical body because you're just not used to being in one, and it just feels so weird. Like, it just feels so foreign. It's like basically the equivalent of like, basically, I'm trying to make an analogy of it, but it's obviously not exactly the same as this analogy, but it's similar enough. Like, it's basically like if you've had a past life, for example, it's basically like traveling to a completely foreign country that you've never been in before, not even in a past life, where you're just like trying to learn a completely new language. And not only that, like, you're not only going to a completely new country, you're trying to learn a completely new language, and you're going to a completely new planet. So like, you're going to like this new planet with a new language, and like in some sort of foreign country that you've never been in. It's like, it's literally feels so bizarre. And not only that, like, you're just not even used to being in a physical body. And that's like what's special about people who are living, or any really living being that's living their first life, is they're not used to being in a physical body. So like, it just feels so weird. It feels very foreign and very just strange. It just feels like my body is used to being in an energy form and is not used to being like physical form. So it just feels very weird and like unusual. Like, um, the ninth sign that you could be a new soul, living your first life in this dimension, is that you resonate with the song New Soul by Yael Naim. Also, but like, what I mean by that is that everything in this world that you're living in right now feels completely new to you, and because of that, you're like super enthusiastic about everything. You're like, oh my gosh, a flower, oh my gosh, sunshine, oh my gosh, it's the moon, oh my gosh, nighttime, it's dark. Like, you're just like, you're just like enthusiastic about like absolutely everything that you see, because it's all super new. You know how like when babies are just like really tiny, like, and they, like, they're just like looking at things around them, and they're like, and they're just like looking at like everything that they see, and they're like, oh my gosh, wow, this is so cool. Like, you're just really enthusiastic because like this is all new stuff that you've never experienced before, and that you've never seen before. Like, nothing that you've seen is vaguely similar to anything you've experienced before. So yeah, that's the ninth sign. The very last sign that I'm going to mention, and by the way, there are more signs in this, just a disclaimer, and also another disclaimer is that you do not need to fit all of these signs perfectly to be living your very first life. That's just a disclaimer. Just use your own discernment and intuition when it comes to determining this, and whether you're living your very first life in this dimension, and determining how many past lives you have had. Just use your own discernment when it comes to checking this out. So the 10th sign that you could be living your very first life in this dimension is that, oh my gosh. So like, this has to do specifically with the way you talk. So like, I know most people would say, oh yeah, it's like, you know, like you have like this childlike or young like demeanor and that you seem super youthful. I feel like that's very much a stereotype. I feel like I mean, it could be, I mean, but like that's not what people told me while I was growing up. Like people were just like, oh, like you seem like an old soul and blah blah blah. So and like you seem very wise and yada yada. And I was like, that's cool and all, but like but that's why I didn't really mention like seeming youthful or like childlike, because that's not really the best sign, I guess. I would go more with like the 10th sign being that the way you talk is like very I'm trying to figure out the best way of describing it. Like very simple, I guess. Yeah, like the way you talk is very simple. Like I work around a lot of children, and like children, like the way they talk is like very like just simple and straightforward. Like the way you talk doesn't seem to have like a lot of like complex ideas in it. So it's like it's not even, I'm trying to describe this in words. Like sometimes if you like are a very like young or like if you're a new soul, like sometimes you'll have trouble putting things into words because like you're not actually used to speaking the human language. Like sometimes you wish you could just like telepathize with people and just be like, yeah, like this is what I'm thinking and this is what I'm saying, like with your mind, but you can't, because it's like you have to actually speak words for people to understand what you're saying. And like when you're in energy form, you can just like, you don't even have to speak. You just like send energy and that energy understands what you're saying without you actually having to physically speak. So like it's like when you're like a new soul, like speaking just feels so weird to you, and like you might like say like really random things or like stutter or like not really like say things the way that you meant to say them. Like that has happened to me so many times. Like I have like tried to say one thing and like the word like comes out completely differently from what I was thinking in my mind. Like, and that's like so common. Like it's like you're even if you're like really good with language and expressing your ideas, even that, like it's like language took longer for you to develop, like when you were like really young. Like when you were a toddler, like instead of like learning like language instantly and picking up all these words like instantly, it took you longer to like learn all of it because it's your first time learning all of it, right? So like when you talk, it's kind of like you're still new to talking, and like you're still trying to figure out how to talk in a way that makes sense to other people and that other people can understand, you know? It's like also like what you say is relatively just like simple and straightforward. It's not something that is like has all these complex ideas and all this like depth to it. Like sure, you might be like a very deep and spiritual person, but like when you talk, it's almost like what you say is just very like simplistic in a way. Not saying that you oversimplify everything, because that's not what I'm trying to say, because I hate it when people oversimplify things and overgeneralize, because that's not something you should ever do, in my opinion. But like it's like oh my gosh, sometimes you have trouble describing things in words. because like you feel like you could easily express it like through energy, but it's so impossible to, it's almost not even impossible. It's like words don't do justice to what you're trying to say, and like you feel like that constantly. Even if what you're saying it really clearly, it still feels like like I'm trying to express a certain thing, but like the way I say it doesn't quite express the way I wanted it to. Like that's how you feel like constantly, like when you're living your first life, like what you say, it's like you kind of struggle with just like talking in general, because it's like hard to like know how to say things in a way that others understand. Like if you've had a lot of like past lives, like what you say, like you know how it's gonna come across to other people for the most part. You know, like okay, like this person, like they like you know how to communicate well, and that's something that you can only get better at with experience. And like people who have had past lives, like they have so much more experience, so like they are usually really good at communicating. You can also be a good communicator if you are living your first life, but like you haven't learned how to communicate as much. Like you haven't learned as readily how to communicate. That being said, like I know how to speak 3 different languages. I know how to speak English, I know how to speak Spanish, I know how to speak English and Spanish fluently. I know how to converse in German and write in German. But that being said, like so like you can like acquire languages quickly because your brain absorbs a lot of energy, but like knowing like how to speak properly and with proper grammar all the time, and like it's just tricky. And like knowing how to like say things in a way that makes sense to other people like that is something that is more tricky for you because you're living your very first life. You're still figuring out how to communicate your ideas to other people in a way that makes sense to them. So yeah, those are the 10 signs that you could be living your very first life in this dimension. And if you are living your very first life in this dimension like me, welcome. If you are someone who has had at least one past life, also I welcome you. I welcome you to this wonderful community of people, and I hope that all of you enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time, everybody, peace out, much love, and may you enjoy this wonderful life. Sometimes I think that people who are living their first life have an advantage because they have a beginner's mind to everything, and that's the way everything needs to be. Like simple beginner's mind, like it's so important. Like even if you're like doing yoga and you've done yoga tons and tons and tons of times, it's good to have a beginner's mind. Like that's what my yoga teacher Margette told me back at Nazareth College. She told me, hey, like it's good to have a beginner's mind because then like everything is like you pay a lot more attention to your movements when you have a beginner's mind. And may you all be free. Goodbye.